These two boxes of Rallyman are jam-packed with possibility, but how on earth do you actually play these games anyway? Board games and confusing rules can sometimes sadly go hand in hand, and a trip through the Board Game Geek forums for various iterations and expansions of Rallyman will prove this point. So it's time we had a look at how to actually play this beloved racing game, the modern version of it at least, in the form of Rallyman GT and Dirt. This video will only cover the basic rules of Rallyman, and will do so in a bit of an unusual way as we drip feed information as and when you need to know it on a journey through a generic Rallyman game. We'll flesh out the details where appropriate, so don't worry about missing anything, and everything is time-stamped for you to skip around however you want. By the end, you'll hopefully have a much better understanding of Rallyman as a system, allowing you to focus on the kinds of events you're most interested in and leap into the advanced rules included in both base games and their expansions, as well as the vast amount of community content that pushes the games out into a multitude of different directions. While we touch upon strategy, that's about as far as we go with regards to it. A dabble here and there, some questions to get you thinking, that kind of thing. A how to win guide, this is not. With that sorted then, do join me as we learn how to race. The first lesson is simple. You win Rallyman by being the fastest player. Sometimes that will mean literally crossing the finish line before all of your opponents, but sometimes it will mean having done so with the quickest time on the stopwatch. It all depends on what kind of event you're competing in, such as a circuit race, as in GT, or a rally, as in Dirt. To finish fast is to use your available dice as efficiently as possible, managing risk versus reward to help you gain the advantage you need over your rivals. Knowing how your dice can be used and how the rules of the road are to be followed will obviously put you in good stead for coming out on top, but a smart player will also know how all of the rules can be broken, for when the almost inevitable crash happens, it is during a loss of control where you'll get the chance to break these very rules for your benefit. Sound interesting? Let's have a look at a generic turn of Rallyman, taking place on a featureless stretch of road with nothing on it to worry about. No matter which kind of event you're racing in, your turns will look like this. You start by looking at your dashboard, which represents your car in its current state, to find out what dice you have available for the turn. We'll go into detail later on about what all the dice are and how to know which dice you can even use, but for now all you need to know is that driving a different class of car, or having taken damage in previous turns, or even there being a change in weather will alter the pool of your dice you have available each turn. From this pool of dice you need to construct a route through the road ahead that obeys not only the rules of the dice, but also the rules of the road. Think of speed limits, obstacles and so on, all impacting how you can and cannot place a die onto that space of the track. You do not need to use all of your available dice each turn, but you must use at least one if it's possible to do so, even if sometimes you really wouldn't want to. Generally speaking, it's a case of putting one die into one space, but we'll see that that isn't always the case later on. Once you've planned a route, you need to decide whether you want to play it safe and roll one by one, or to take a bit of a gamble and go flat out to earn rewards that will be useful on future turns. In either case, if you end up gaining enough hazard symbols on your dice or from the track to equal or exceed your loss of control limit shown on your dashboard, then you're about to crash, which is generally a bad thing, as you would imagine, but it's not always the end of the world. No matter the result of each die you roll, you'll make forward progress into the space it was used in, and once you've rolled all of the dice that you want, that's pretty much your turn done. You might be able to perform additional actions like coming into the pits to repair your car or swap tyres, but other than that, what's done is done, and you'll either mark on the track what gear you've finished in, or take a time card to keep track of how much time has elapsed on the stopwatch, and play then passes on to the next player in turn order. Keep doing that round after round until someone wins, and that's generic Rallyman. Time to introduce you to all the details. Let's start with what is perhaps the most important component to you, the dashboard. They come in a couple of different layouts, one of which you may have built yourself, and we'll discuss all their details later, because for now you just need to know two things: what dice are available and what your loss of control limit is. Let's imagine we're driving a GT6. This is our car class, and most classes have multiple dashboards to choose from depending on the kind of race or situation we find ourselves in. For now, we'll imagine that this is our dashboard, and it says that we have 6 gear dice, 2 coast dice, and 3 brake dice to make use of each turn. That's the maximum amount of dice of those kinds that we can use on a turn, provided we don't take any damage. Our dashboard also says that our loss of control limit is 3 hazards, which is the most likely limit you'll see. If we roll or receive 3 or more hazards during a turn, we lose control and crash. Before we worry about that though, how do we go about using these 11 dice? Our GT6 has each of the 3 kinds of dice there are in Rallyman, but there are 5 different colours of dice that we might see during our games, depending on what content we have available. While you might not have all the colours of dice that Rallyman offers as a whole, you'll definitely have enough to get you to the finish line with whatever base game you're using. The first kind are gear dice. From 1 to 6, each die represents your current speed, where 6 is the fastest and 1 the slowest, and as such, gear and speed are mostly interchangeable terms when it comes to Rallyman. Some car classes have access to more gear dice than others, and so some cars are therefore faster than others, or are at least more capable of being faster than others. The quick rule of thumb to remember is that a car's class is also its top gear. A GT5 cannot use the gear 6 die as its top gear is 5th, and an R4 cannot use gears 5 or 6 as its top gear is 4, for example. Each space of the track can contain one of your gear dice, and you can only use each gear die once per turn. In addition, each gear die you place must be either one gear lower, one gear higher, or equal to your current speed at that point of your turn. For example, as you are guaranteed to start each event in gear 0, your first turn will naturally be 1, 2, 3, and so on. Each die has been used once, each die is in its own space, and each die is, in this case, one gear higher than the previous speed that we were in. So while our choice for how and where to place dice from the start of the race was easy, as we progress through the race we're going to be ending turns at lots of different speeds, and so dice placement will get a little more involved. Let's now imagine we've ended a turn in 3rd gear then. How does that affect what we can do on our next turn? Well, our current speed is 3, so we might place 4, 5, 6 to speed up, or 2, 1 to slow down. But we could also start with 3rd gear for a run of 3, 4, 5, 6, or 3, 2, 1. We can even have runs of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 4, 3, 2, 1. Can you see how knowing what gears you're allowed to start a turn with can help you extend the distance of your turn? Placing out 4, 5, 6 will see you end the turn in 6th gear, the fastest you can go, but placing 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 will see you end the turn at that faster speed a couple of spaces closer to the finish line. How important it is for you to get those extra spaces will be rather situational, but be on the lookout for opportunities to do so, as it might make all the difference. The last thing you need to know about your gear dice is that gears 1 and 2 are considered safe dice to roll, as they only have one hazard symbol on them, but every other gear die has 2 hazard symbols, making them dangerous dice and therefore riskier to roll. But you'll want to take some risks to end your turn as fast as you can, won't you? The second kind of dice are coast or leader dice. These white or orange dice copy the value of your current speed, allowing you to extend its use through more than one space of the track. Importantly, you can start a turn with one of these dice so long as you're not in gear 0, freeing up the use of a gear die for later on in the turn. For example, if we've ended another turn in 3rd gear, we can start with a coast die to represent gear 3, drop into 2nd, coast again perhaps, now representing gear 2, and then accelerate all the way up through the gears to finish in 6th. You don't have to use all of your coast die each turn, and they don't have to represent the same gear value. We could just as easily have planned a route of 4, 5, 6 coast, for example. But again, you'll notice that smart use of coast dice combined with the gear dice can mean getting further down the track while still managing to end at the same high speed. Coast dice are the more likely dice that you'll encounter, and they are safe dice, having just the one hazard symbol on them. But in some situations, notably on the Rallyman Dirt side, you'll be forced to use the more dangerous orange leader dice instead. They function exactly the same as the white coast dice, but they have 2 hazard symbols on them and are therefore riskier to roll. Whenever I say coast dice from here on, what I'm saying will also apply to these leader dice, and we'll learn why they're called that later. The final kind of dice are brake and boost dice, and they allow for even finer manipulation of the dice that we've been using so far. Let's start with the red brake dice. Each of these dice must be accompanied with a gear die, and for each brake die there is in a space, we can effectively ignore the gear die placement rules and skip one gear value. For example, if we're in 6th gear at the start of our turn, the rules of the gear dice allow us to start with either gears 5 or 6, but using brake dice allows us to start with an even lower gear die than that. One brake die allows us to start in 4th gear. The brake die represents us skipping 5th gear, and so our turn would look like brake 4, 5, 6. If we have more than one brake die, we can put them into the same space. So with 2 brake dice, we can start in 3rd gear. One brake die represents us skipping 5th, and the other represents us skipping 4th. And now our turn might look like brake 3, 4, 5, 6. We don't have to use all of our brakes each turn, and we don't even have to use them all in the same space, meaning they can be used anywhere on a turn. We could have a turn that goes brake 4, 5, brake 2, 3. So long as we have enough brake dice to make use of, we can put them wherever we want into our route to give us more control over our speed at a given point. Boost dice work identically but in the opposite direction. They allow us to skip gears on the way up through our gearbox, allowing us to reach the higher gears quicker. We can boost from second straight into fourth, for example, allowing us to use the gear 3 die at some other point on this turn, or even not at all. Usually you'll have access to more brake dice than boost dice, with many car classes having no boost dice at all, but they can be used to dance around your gearbox with some smart placement. For example, if we start a turn in 5th gear, our turn might look like brake 2, 1, boost 3, 4, 5, with some coast dice sprinkled in for good measure to add even more movement down the track. Brake dice are dangerous and have 2 hazard symbols, but boost dice are safe and have just the 1 hazard. Now you know how the dice are used on a blank, featureless track. How do they get used in conjunction with the rules of the road? What dangers might you face on your trip from start to finish? Buckle up, because there's a fair few things to go over here. Every die you place needs to take you closer to the finish line. That's not just good advice, those are the rules. Each space has a front edge, and wherever it is, the next space you enter must have a front edge further down the track than the space you're in. While the notion of a front edge isn't explicitly defined for each and every space, you can pretty quickly work out what does and doesn't get you closer to the finish line just by looking at the spaces around you. Moving sideways doesn't get you any closer to a win, and so you can't move sideways. But moving forward does, and you can do so diagonally if you want. So long as you make forward progress into an empty space that you can reach, you're good to go. Which of course means other cars can get in your way and make it difficult for you to be where on the track you want to be. Only one car can occupy a space, even if there is enough physical space on the tile to share, as there would be in this fast lane, for example. So if someone is in your way, you'll need to find a way around them. Whenever you want to place one or more dice next to another car, you need to at least equal the speed of that car in that space. For example, if this car is in 3rd gear, we have to find a way to be in 3rd, 4th, 5th or 6th gear alongside them in order to overtake them. If we can't do that, then we can't get past them at all, in which case we'll have to end our turn here. It's important to note that when we say alongside, we mean at any point and any distance away. So even if there is a gap between your cars, you'll still need to be in the correct speed to overtake. And if they occupy a fast lane, you'll need to be at the right speed in both standard spaces to be able to complete the overtake. What we mean by completing the overtake is to reach a space whose front edge is at the same distance as the front edge of the car you're overtaking. Anything you do in the spaces beyond this point is entirely up to you. You can speed up, you can slam on the brakes, whatever you like. You have, by getting to this distance, completed the overtake, and there's no more need for you to be travelling at a certain speed. If you're boxed in by a number of cars, don't worry. So long as there is a space that you can reach while obeying all the relevant rules, you can squeeze through the tightest of gaps. But if you are really boxed in, you might be considered as being blocked. If at any point on your turn you cannot reach the speed necessary to overtake a car, or moving would cause you to suffer an immediate loss of control because of another car, then you are blocked and your turn effectively ends immediately. Not moving at all still counts as having taken a turn, which in some events will mean adding another time card to your stack. The clock keeps counting even when you're not moving, after all. We'll come to an example of finding yourself in a tricky spot a little later, but for now it's important to remember that every player has some degree of control over what other players must do on their turn if they want to overtake. Smart positioning of your car can make it riskier to overtake you, and even smarter positioning can make it impossible. These rules about overtaking are our introduction to the idea of speed limits, which you'll see printed on the track tiles all over the place. If you see a number on a track, chances are very high that it's a speed limit, and it acts exactly like you think it would. If you place a die in its space that represents a speed higher than that printed, you immediately lose control and crash. Any speed equal to or lower than it, and you're good to carry on with your turn. But there are nuances to these speed limits to take note of. A number in a circle is your standard speed limit. Far more often than not, they are found in a corner space, but sometimes they're found on a line that divides 2 spaces. In all cases, moving into a space with a speed limit requires you to obey the speed limit or crash. For example, ahead of us is a speed limit of 4 and we're currently in 6th gear. In order to not crash, we're going to need to brake down to at least 4th gear. If we don't have enough brake dice to do that, then we're going to enter the space, break the speed limit and crash. Remember, it's a speed limit, not a speed requirement, so we can be in the space in 1st, 2nd, 3rd or 4th gear with nothing to worry about. When faced with a speed limit on a line between 2 spaces, found on junction tiles like this, the limit will be applied if we drive over this line into the space beyond it. So while we can be here at any speed we like, we have no choice but to drive over this line, causing the speed limit to be applied to the space beyond it, and so we'll have to hope we have a way to obey its limit, else we lose control. This half line, by the way, is a visual reminder that two cars can be side by side here and can freely move in either direction, which might come in handy for overtaking someone. This, for example, is a valid method of overtaking a car in an awkward position, assuming you can match or exceed its speed while still obeying the speed limits on track. This notion of driving over a line and obeying a new speed limit is key to understanding sharp corners. Whenever you see a number on a dotted line, driving directly over it will cause the next space you enter to have a speed limit of that number. Usually this means a speed limit that is already present will get reduced by 1 or more, but it also means that when you exit a corner, you might still be subject to a speed limit, depending on how you exit the corner. These sharp corners therefore teach you about the ideal racing line through the circuit. You might have heard of the racing line in terms like outside, inside, outside, as in the ideal way to tackle a corner is to approach it on its outside, turn in to meet its inside, and then drive back towards the outside. If you follow this idea in Rallyman, you will avoid a lot of the sharp corner limits and will therefore be able to tackle the corners at faster speeds. But if other cars are in the way, you'll have to compromise your entry or exit from a corner by driving over one or more of these sharp corner limits. Some of these sharp corner limits are so inefficient in terms of being the best way to drive through a corner that you'll take a hazard symbol for driving over them instead of having an altered speed limit. This hazard contributes to the total hazard count of your turn, so you might end up crashing in the next space not because of the dice you roll, but because you went into the corner at so tight an angle. In some situations there may even be multiple sharp corner limits affecting the same spaces. If you encounter more than one, the lowest number is the speed limit of the next space you enter, and if you encounter both a speed limit and a hazard symbol, well, you need to obey the new speed limit and take a hazard for your turn. So you'll want to avoid these speed limits as much as you can, and moving diagonally is the best way to do so. But if moving diagonally takes you into the same space as moving forward would do, then it's functionally the same as driving straight over a sharp corner limit. For example, on this chicane we can't drive around this sharp corner limit as we end up in the same space as we would if we were to drive straight. In this kind of situation, with one double wide space going into another double wide space, it is functionally one space going straight into another. So we can imagine the sharp corner limit line as stretching all the way across the space. But in this more likely situation, it doesn't stretch across, and we can drive into the middle lane without having to impose a speed limit on its space. So smart positioning of your car can force players to compromise their line through a corner, or better yet, keep them behind you. Take this situation for example. To try and overtake you, this car must be in at least third gear, but to enter either space is to drive over a sharp corner limit of 1 or 2, therefore breaking the speed limit of the space and losing control. They're going to have to end their turn on the corner as a result of getting blocked and wait for you to move out of the way. The more you play, the more you'll spot these kind of situations, but do know that sometimes you will want to compromise your line through a corner, especially if it gives you turn order when you desperately need it. So don't fear sharp corners, learn how to get the most from them. The last kind of speed limit icon to learn about represents the dangerous corners. These limits are shown in a triangle rather than a circle, and they act identically to the standard circular speed limits, except that if you are in a dangerous corner in the same speed as that printed, you'll pick up an extra hazard symbol for your turn. So, if we're in this space in first, second or third, we're good. If we're in it in fifth or sixth, we've broken the speed limit and crash as normal. And if we're here in fourth, we take one hazard symbol, which may of course mean we meet our loss of control limit and crash. They're not called dangerous corners for fun, you know. These dangerous corners are always on the outside and are another way of highlighting how a good racing line will see you avoid trouble. Outside, inside, outside. Simple. We're not quite out of the world of speed limits yet though, or more accurately, we've got one more kind of corner to cover. The corners of Rallyman GT are all separate spaces, but over in Rallyman Dirt, corners are a little more involved, featuring multiple speed limits that come into effect depending on how you traverse them. There are two ways to do so, the inside line or the outside line, usually called the drifting line. You get to decide which line you use through these corners, but the catch is that you can't change your mind halfway through. So, if you decide to use the inside line, your car is subject to the speed limit of the inside line space, which will always be lower than that of the drifting line. If you want to maintain your speed then, you can opt for the drifting line instead, but now you've got more spaces to travel through before you can exit the corner. All of these white lines printed on the corner are the front edges of a space within the corner space itself. Often the inside line has just the one space before the corner is finished, but the drifting line can have 2 or 3. If you're on a tile like this, where some of the front edges look like they join to span the width of the track, What you're actually looking at are two corner spaces side by side, and so you can tackle one in the inside and the other on the outside, for example, and not fall foul of changing lines mid-corner. Remember when we said that each space can only have one car in it? That's not quite true when it comes to these corner spaces. The entire corner space, comprising of both the inside and outside lines, counts as one single space on the track until a car enters it, at which point it becomes either an inside line corner or a drifting corner. At that point, any other car can also enter the corner space, but only if they do so via the same method as the car ahead, the inside or the outside, and only if there is an unoccupied space of that type to enter. This is also true on tiles where the corner spaces look large enough to accommodate multiple cars on multiple trajectories through the corner. If the lead car is on the final inside lane space here, while it looks like the first drifting space is available to enter, it actually doesn't exist at all until there is no car on the corner, and so you'll have to follow this car on the inside instead. You might be thinking all of this is a bit strange. Why would corner spaces not exist, and why would I ever enter a drift if it means having to take the longer route through a corner? Well, sometimes Rallyman is a race against the clock, not just your opponents, and knowing how to tackle a corner efficiently means knowing when to sacrifice time to go through the inside and when to keep your speed up around the outside. Both can have dramatic knock-on effects that might not be known until the next turn or beyond. Similarly, in events where there's the potential for pushing and shoving, being able to have even just a little bit of control over what your rivals can and can't do on their turn might make all the difference when it comes to keeping them behind you, unable to overtake. Experience will be your best teacher to answer those kind of questions. Similar questions can be asked of the sliding spaces, usually found either side of a corner space and marked with these dashed lines. These spaces can be entered as though they were a standard space, your car pointing forward, or you can slide into them sideways and treat them as two spaces instead, expanding the length of the track to allow you to get the job done. For example, if you came up to this corner in 5th gear but have only got one brake die, then you're not going to be able to use it to get down to 2nd gear to obey the speed limit, so you're going to crash. If you instead made use of the slide spaces, you'll be able to drop to 4th or brake to 3rd before you even got to the corner space. Sliding spaces give you more options then, and those options continue into the corner space itself. You can still tackle the corner space however you want after sliding or not sliding. Choosing to slide doesn't force you to drift. Like the corner spaces, anyone following you as you slide will have to do so in the same fashion. You can't use half of a standard space, and some sliding spaces, notably on snow, are forced, and so everyone will have to get sideways at some point. Like navigating the corner spaces, slide spaces help you to control the flow of the race, and this is also true of intersections. Here, as soon as one car enters an intersection, that car defines how all other cars must also enter the intersection, otherwise they have to wait for it to be empty once more. You've probably driven on some figure-of-8 circuits in video games with predictable consequences. The same thing can happen in Rallyman under some advanced rules, but if you're not using those advanced rules, you can imagine how these kinds of spaces can be used to control the cars around you to a small degree. If you span the entire width of the track, there's just no space for anyone to overtake you. Unless there might be another way through corners in dirt, and that is to shortcut them entirely. Doing so allows you to keep your speed up, but you run the risk of taking damage. But if you don't take damage, you might end up spraying mud all over the corner, making it harder for other cars to traverse. You can enter a shortcut from any space adjacent to it, but doing so requires you to obey its speed limit, which is the number printed in the shortcut space, and to grab the damage bag and pull out a shortcut token. There are 3 kinds of shortcut tokens. An OK token is self-explanatory, you've made it through the shortcut without any issues and can carry on with your turn. A -1 speed limit token is a mud token. These get applied to the corner space that you've just cut, and they reduce all speed limits on that corner by 1, and they can stack, meaning a corner can be reduced to having a speed limit of 0, and therefore becoming impassable. But the shortcut token you don't want to pull is coast die damage. Do so and you've picked up a puncture, losing the use of a coast die going forward until you're able to repair it. Is it worth the risk of taking the shortcut then? Sometimes it can be. If a corner is rendered impassable, then everyone else must go through the shortcut and risk picking up a puncture. Is that possibility something to consider? You cannot move from a shortcut to its corner space or from the corner to its shortcut, unless bad things have happened. If, for example, you are drifting on the corner, but someone sprays mud onto it, rendering the next space impassable, then you are allowed to move into the shortcut to keep going. Similarly, if you find yourself in an outside lane space that isn't adjacent to the shortcut, but the corner is rendered impassable before you're able to take your turn, then you're also allowed to enter the shortcut space. And remember that whenever you enter a shortcut space, you draw a shortcut token. And, as you can imagine, you can absolutely overtake someone by diving into a shortcut, so be sure to keep an eye out for the opportunity. With all this mud getting thrown around, you'll want to wash it off to keep the sponsors happy, which is the only segue I can think of to get us talking about water hazards. We should probably call them water splashes, because as we know, hazards are symbols on the dice or the track that we don't want to see too many of. These water splashes then are spaces that span the entire width of the track and will cause you to end your turn unless you're using a coast die or a Gear 1 die on their space. You can place any die or dice into a water splash, but only these two dice will allow you to continue placing dice out into the next spaces. And do note that breaking down to first gear does not count. The break die will also cause you to end your turn early. Don't feel that you have to use a coast die on a water splash though. Ending your turn in the water doesn't give you any damage or anything, it just stops you from placing any more dice out beyond the water splash on this turn. If you've already placed a load of dice out to get to this point, or you simply want to be in a certain speed at the end of your turn, there's no harm in ending your turn in the water. Oh, and if you think you've found a sneaky way to avoid a crash by deliberately ending your turn in a water splash while losing control, think again. When we say end your turn, we don't mean it literally. It just means that you can't plan to use dice beyond falling foul of a water splash. What would a race be without jumps? Flat is what it would be. Jump spaces allow us to skip spaces depending on what speed we find ourselves in when we get to the jump space itself. For example, this is a Gear 3 jump. If we're in this space in Gears 1 or 2, then nothing happens and we treat it as a normal space of the track. If we're in this space in 3rd gear, however we manage to get there, then we'll move that die or those dice into the next space of the track and carry on from there, having taken the jump at the perfect speed. If we're in this space in 4th gear, we'll get to move into the 2nd space instead. However, if we roll a hazard symbol on this die, then we'll get into that space and immediately crash. Importantly, this will happen if any dice we use in that space at 4th gear results in a hazard symbol. So if we had to slam on the brakes to get down to 4th gear, then either the gear or brake die rolling a hazard will cause an immediate loss of control. Finally, if we're in this space in 5th or 6th gear, we'll get to move into the 2nd space beyond the jump, but we'll then immediately crash no matter the result of our dice. We're just too quick and out of control to land safely. To recap, any speed below the jump limit results in no jump at all. Hitting it at equal speed results in 1 space of movement. Hitting it 1 gear higher results in 2 spaces of movement, but may result in a crash if there is a hazard on the dice. And hitting it at 2 or more gears higher results in 2 spaces of movement and an instant crash. You can't land in a space with another car, but you can absolutely jump over one if you're going fast enough. You can similarly jump over water splashes, or even over entire corners if you want, physics be damned. You can land in slide spaces, or drifts, or even shortcuts, so long as you can count the correct number of spaces from the jump space to your landing space. Upon landing, you're then subject to whatever the rules of that space are. So landing in a drift means having to obey its speed limit or crash. Landing in a shortcut requires you to pull a shortcut token. And landing in a water splash may end your turn unless you've jumped into it with a coast die. The only exception is that while you can land on another jump space, you can't use it to immediately jump again. Jumps make the track a little more three-dimensional, but climb tiles turn the stages into hill climbs, or descents of course, depending on which direction you're racing in. Whenever you see an arrow with a plus or minus 1, you're on an ascent or descent, and the ascending or descending rules kick in. Let's imagine ourselves at the bottom of a hill, which is shown with the -1 arrows in the direction of travel. They indicate to us that in each next space we enter while moving in their direction, we must use a gear die whose value is 1 lower than our current gear. So, if we're here in 5th gear, we must use 4th gear, then 3rd gear, until we're at the other end of the tile. Importantly, this rule does not affect the first space of the tile, so that's your last chance to set your initial speed. And it doesn't matter which side of the road you're driving on, you are definitely going uphill if you're moving in the direction of the ascent arrows. You cannot use coast, brake or boost dice as you normally would while on an ascent. If you want to coast, it must be accompanied by a boost die, and if you want to brake or boost to choose a better gear, well, you can't. Going downhill is very much the same, but instead of decreasing your gear by 1, you must increase it by 1, and instead of pairing a coast die with a boost die, you pair it with a brake die. It's easy to imagine. If you're at the top of a hill and start to roll down it, you're going to pick up more and more speed before you reach the bottom and will have to brake if you want some degree of control. If you find yourself in an awkward situation, such as having suffered a crash halfway up a climb, you are always able to ignore these rules to move just one space in first gear, but will then have to end your turn unless you can now obey the climbing rules. As you've seen in these examples, Rallyman features 3 different surfaces to race over: asphalt, gravel and snow. Asphalt tends to feature more speed limits, gravel tends to provide more sliding and drifting opportunities, and snow tends to force you to take a certain line. But otherwise, what you see on stage with regard to the surface type itself isn't any different. What matters is found back on your dashboard. This is the standard R6 dashboard, and if we look at the picture of the tyre, or the leftmost surface icon, we can see that this is the R6's gravel dashboard, representing its set of gravel tyres, which, you can imagine, are going to work better on gravel than anywhere else. Here we have 4 different dice pools available to us, depending on what surface we're driving over during our turns. When we're on gravel, we're allowed to use up to 6 gear dice, 2 coast dice and 1 brake die, and if we get 3 or more hazard symbols, we lose control. None of this is any different from the GT6 dashboard that we saw previously, apart from the R6 having fewer brake dice, and so you already know how to interpret this column. Let's look at the snow surface at the other side of the dashboard. Here, if we're on snow, we can use up to 5 gear dice, 2 leader dice, and we have no brake die at all. Remember what we said about a car's highest gear? We can always use the highest gear die our car class provides, even if we can't use all of our gear dice. So, if we find ourselves on snow, we can use any 5 gear dice from gears 1 to 6, but we cannot use all 6 gear dice while we're on the snow. Remember also when we said that sometimes we might be forced to use leader dice instead of coast dice. This is true for us here whenever we're on snow. It is riskier for us to maintain a steady speed on snow than it is on gravel while this is our dashboard. If we look at the asphalt column, we'll see that we're able to use the safer coast dice again, but still not have as many gear dice to use and still have no brake die at all. All this is a long way of saying that these gravel tyres are great on gravel, alright on asphalt, and somewhat manageable on snow. Now, what happens when your turn takes you over multiple surfaces? Well, put simply, each die you place down must adhere to the dice pool limits of that surface. For example, let's put gears 1, 2, 3 and 4 down into these snow spaces. Have we hit our limit of 5 gear dice yet? No, we haven't, so we can put down 5th gear into the next space as well. But now we're at our limit of gear dice on snow, and so we can't put down 6th gear at all unless we can find a way off this snow tile. So let's extend our 5th gear with a leader die. Now we're at the edge of the snow and the next space is gravel, so we can finally put down our 6th gear die because, while we're on gravel, we're allowed to have made a use of a maximum of 6 gear dice for the turn, and we have. Let's keep going. Let's put down a coast die, which we can do because we're on gravel, but now we're at our limit of the use of coast dice, because we're only allowed to use 2 for the turn. Remember, while the colours of coast and leader dice are different, and the leader die is riskier to roll than the coast die, they're functionally the same dice. So if we put down another coast die, thinking we have the option of placing 2 white and 2 orange dice, we're actually breaking the rules and are using too many dice. On this particular dashboard, we don't have to worry about different loss of control limits, as every surface has a limit of 3 hazards before losing control. But other dashboards will have different loss of control limits for different surfaces. Let's imagine we're on the R6's asphalt tyres instead. While on the asphalt we have a loss of control limit of 3, but on snow it drops to 2. This has 2 effects. Firstly, it means that it is now possible to immediately crash as soon as we decide to roll a die before we even see what it rolls. Take this situation for example. We have rolled 2 hazards on asphalt and haven't crashed because the asphalt loss of control limit is 3. But the next space is a snow space. If we place a die down here, we have to assess it according to the dice pool and loss of control limit of the snow surface section of our dashboard. While we might be able to place the die down having not reached the maximum amount of gear dice, for example, doing so will cause us to then check the loss of control limit, which is now 2, and we've already got 2 hazards for the turn. There is no possible way to put this die onto the track and not crash, and so it's better for us to just end the turn before we touch the snow. Remember, these aren't separate dice pools or loss of control limits. You don't get 6 gear dice to use on asphalt and another 6 to use on snow, or a combined total of 5 hazards before a loss of control. No, you check your running total against the limits of the surface you're currently on, and that's that. The second effect of multiple loss of control limits is when choosing to roll flat out, you will compare your results against the lowest limit only. Even if you placed 7 dice on asphalt and just 1 die on snow, you will crash if you roll 2 or more hazards because your lowest limit of these surfaces is 2, thanks to the snow. Again, perhaps it's better to end your turn before you make use of the snow space. You'll get a feel for it in time. So now that we've learned how the dice are used and the rules of the road, we're ready to actually race, right? Not so fast. We're now going back to that generic turn to have a look at our options regarding how to roll all of these dice. Let's imagine our turn looks like this: accelerating up to a corner, slamming on the brakes, coasting through, and accelerating out the other side as fast as we can. We've checked our plan over, it doesn't break any speed limits, we've used all the dice correctly, so we're good to roll. But how do we do that? We've got 2 choices, 1 by 1 or flat out, safe or risky. Let's go through it safely first, rolling 1 by 1. Each space of our route is going to be assessed one at a time. Any dice in a space will get rolled at the same time, and we can decide to stop rolling at any point we want. We don't have to roll every single die that we've planned out, but it would be nice if we could make it that far, and we do have to roll the dice in at least one space, even if doing so would cause us to crash, unless we are considered blocked. We're looking to avoid rolling hazard symbols. If we assume our loss of control limit is 3, then we can roll 2 hazards without worrying, but a third will result in an immediate loss of control and a crash in whatever space we were in where that third hazard occurred. Rolling 1 by 1, we are then weighing up whether we want to roll the next die or combination of dice, or whether we want to stop short and end our turn before we crash. We know which dice are safe and which are dangerous, and so we'll have some idea of how likely a hazard is on any given die. But when multiple dice are rolled together, notably when breaking down to a lower gear, things get a little riskier. It is entirely possible for you to roll 3 or more hazards in a single space, especially if you use every break die you have available to you, for example. They each have a 1 in 3 chance of rolling a hazard symbol, after all. To mitigate the chances of losing control, you can spend focus or second tokens, depending on what kind of event you're in, to secure dice without needing to roll them, ensuring that no hazard symbols will appear on their faces. The terms focus and seconds are generally interchangeable, and often players would default to the one they're familiar with, in my case focus, but do note that seconds have an additional benefit that will make sense later. The first die you wish to secure at any point on your turn costs 1 focus, the second die costs 2 focus, the third die 3 focus, and so on. The costs climb pretty quickly, and the catch is that if a space has more than 1 die, all of those dice have to be paid for, else none of them can be secured. The smart move is therefore to pay for the riskiest dice or spaces only, hoping that the safer dice are as safe as they say they are. But if you haven't got the focus to pay for the dice, then you're going to need to end your turn short or take a gamble on rolling. So how do you get focus or second tokens then? By going flat out, the other, riskier way to roll your dice. Instead of addressing the dice space by space, going flat out means grabbing all the dice you've put out on track and rolling them at the same time. For every gear and coast die that you roll flat out, you get a focus token, so you can earn quite a few with a handful of dice, but you are of course rolling more dice and therefore increasing the likelihood of you rolling lots of hazard symbols. Luckily, you'll get all these focus tokens even if you do end up crashing, so don't be too fearful of the odds. If you roll fewer hazard symbols than your loss of control limit, and the hazard symbols that you did roll were on dice that wouldn't have caused an immediate loss of control if they rolled a hazard, we'll get to that issue shortly, then congratulations, you've put yourself right where you intended to be at the end of your turn. However, if you rolled as many or more than your loss of control limit, or certain dice haven't gone your way, then you've lost control and are about to decide how to crash. It's not as bad as it sounds. In fact, this is the part of Rallyman where the best players show you how good they really are. So let's say we've rolled all these hazards and have therefore lost control. We now have to place these dice back out on track in such a way as to end our turn with a crash. This can be because of putting down enough hazards to equal our loss of control limit, or by deliberately breaking a rule that we've been obeying up until this point, such as a speed limit. We don't have to place the dice down in the same order that we planned if we don't want to, and often we won't want to. The slower we are moving when we crash, the better. So if we can reorganize the dice to crash in first or second gear, that'll be great. You'll have free rein over how you crash and can even drive through sharp corners or speed over jumps, for example, to pick up more hazards with which to crash. All that matters is that you end your turn with a crash, and when you do, you can finally find out how bad a crash it was. Before we move on to assessing damage, we briefly mention the issue of dice that would have immediately caused a loss of control. In some circumstances, especially with variant rules, some dice will immediately cause you to crash or will introduce some other effect if they roll a hazard, even if every other die you roll didn't show a hazard, and thus you are well within your loss of control limit. In such cases, players will often roll these dice separately to see if there is any issue to address before rolling the rest. Why might this be an issue then? Let's imagine there's a jump on our route and we're going over it one gear higher than its printed speed. According to the jump rules, if any of the dice on the jump space roll a hazard, we crash upon landing. But what if we went over the jump using a coast die and we've used other coast dice elsewhere on our route? How can we tell one coast die from another if we roll them at the same time? And so, some players will insist on resolving this kind of situation separately, whereas other players will be more in favour of giving the benefit of doubt to a driver. Make sure your opponents are clear on how your particular Rallyman race will be ruled, because this can be a hot topic of debate. There are two ways to find out the severity of a crash, and they depend on what kind of dashboard you're using. If your dashboard has a damage table, like the GT6 here, then you'll be cross-referencing the speed you ended in with the danger level of the space you were in when you crashed, the result showing you your new ending gear, 0 or 00, and how many damage tokens you draw, if any. For example, if we crashed in second gear, we're told to put ourselves in gear 0, and then we can check for the danger level of the space we crashed in to work out our damage, which is incredibly easy here, as crashing in second gear results in drawing no damage at all, no matter what space we crashed in. When we say that we crashed in second, we always mean the speed we were intending to be in on the space that we crashed, so how fast we would have been going at that point had we not lost control, essentially. So let's imagine we instead crashed in fourth gear on an orange danger level tile. We're now in gear 00, which is even slower than gear 0, and we draw 1 damage token. If we crash in sixth gear on a red tile, we're also in gear 00, but we're drawing 4 damage tokens. So it's easy to see how crashing at high speed is much worse than crashing at lower speeds, isn't it? But this is just one kind of car. Other cars may see us taking more or less damage, or never ending in gear 00 at all. Knowing how sturdy our car is will give us a better idea of how we should crash, should we end up losing control of it in the first place, of course. But what if your dashboard doesn't have a damage table? On the back of every time card is the result of a crash at that speed. Take a time card for the gear you crashed in and turn it over. It'll tell you which gear you're now in, usually 0, as well as how much damage you take according to the danger level of the tile you crashed in. If you're very lucky, you'll have taken no damage at all and just spin around on the spot. You may even end up drawing a Sisu card, which effectively results in you not crashing at all, maintaining your speed as you pretend nothing bad ever happened. Whether you've taken damage or not, what happens to your car? In short, if you're in gear 0, you remain on track in the space you crashed in, but facing backwards to remind everyone of your fate, unless the time card you drew has just the one arrow, in which case you're off track, near the space you crashed in. Just park it off to the side of the road for the moment. We'll see how you can get back on track soon enough. If you end in gear 00, you're definitely off the track, again nearest the space in which you crashed, or to whichever side of the track you want if you crashed in the middle lane. Now that you've come to a stop, it's time to see what damage you can get and what it all does. Firstly, there are the die damage tokens. They might look a little different depending on which flavour of Rallyman you have, but they're all interpreted the same. For each die damage token you take, your limits from the next turn onwards until you repair your car are reduced by 1. These damage tokens are kept on or near your dashboard to remind you that they directly affect the dice pools available to you. So, pick up a coast die damage token and your coast die limit will drop by 1. Pick up 2 coast die damage tokens and your coast die limit will drop by 2. If you pick up even more coast die damage tokens and you don't have any more coast dice to lose, great! The extra damage doesn't have any additional effect on your car. This is also true for your brake and boost dice, but things are a little more complicated for your gear dice. If you pick up a gear die damage token, your limit of gear dice available to your turn will drop by 1, but this damage does not affect a specific gear value. Just like travelling over different surfaces that present different limits of gear dice, gear die damage only means that you can't make use of all your gear dice. You can always, provided you follow the rules of the dice and the road, get up to your car class's highest speed even if you have gear damage. For example, if our GT6 has 3 gear die damage tokens, one turn might see us use gears 4, 5 and 6, and the next turn we can slam on the brakes to use gears 3, 2 and 1. The final note about gear die damage is that unlike the other dice, if you take as many or more gear die damage tokens as you have gears, then you are forced to retire from the race. It's very hard to move when you have no gears, and remember, your coast dice can only copy a speed that isn't gear 0, so they won't be able to help you either. Retiring in a circuit race results in a DNF, but retiring in a timed event like a rally will mean that your stage time is 1 full minute slower than the slowest driver to have successfully completed that stage, and you'll have your work cut out for you to close the gap to the front on future stages. To make that easier, after retiring, your car is fully repaired before the next stage. Remember that during the course of the game, all die damage tokens are applied to your car on your next turn. It is therefore still possible to make use of all your coast dice after you've gone through a shortcut and picked up a puncture, provided that they are used on that same turn. It may be possible for you to draw a die damage token for a kind of die that you do not have on your car. So in such a situation, draw another damage token as a replacement and return the token that you couldn't apply back to the damage bag. Die damage is generally to be avoided as much as possible, but there are other damage tokens that you might draw from the damage bag instead, and these will also count as having taken damage, even if they don't do anything to your car. Green flags don't do anything other than say that you've managed to avoid drawing anything bad for you, so they're always nice to see. Yellow flags are a little more involved. Whoever draws a yellow flag places the token next to their crashed car. Until that car moves from its space, there is no overtaking allowed on its tile or the tiles before and after it, unless you are overtaking a car in gear 0 or gear 00. Finally, you might encounter a weather token. As soon as you do, the weather changes from whatever state it is in to whatever state it isn't in, from dry to wet or wet to dry. You'll have spotted the sunny icon on the GT6 dashboard. Flip the dashboard over and you'll see the rain icon. Compare the two sides and you'll notice that your dry weather tyres aren't very good in the wet, so you'll have to come into the pits to change them, or stay out and gamble on the weather changing back sometime soon. Whether you ended a turn safely or backwards in the bushes, you need to mark your position on the track with a gear marker of your colour and speed, or take an appropriate time card and place it in a stack in front of you. The gear markers record your position and are used for turn order, and you should place them such that they're on the opposite side to the colour of the round marker. We'll go through turn order soon enough, don't worry. If you don't need to use gear markers, then you're in an event that cares about the time you took each turn instead, which is tracked by a stack of time cards, the topmost card showing your current speed. Again, we'll go through that soon enough. Once you've marked your status, whether it is what you intended to do or not, that's your turn done. You've chosen your dice, planned out a route, decided how to roll, and have hopefully not crashed, and you can now let your opponents take their turns. There are just a few things left to learn about what you can do on your turn before we talk about why all these decisions matter. Let's talk about pitting and repairing damage. Both GT and Dirt give you the option to make repairs to your car, but under different circumstances. In GT, you can pull into the pits from any space at the edge of the circuit, so long as it has no speed limit and you are in gear 1. If you decide to pit, move your car from the track to the pit tile in a row of your choice. These rows represent you deciding to change your tyres, repair your damage, or both. If you just want to change your tyres, swap your Gear 1 marker for Gear 0 and swap your current dashboard for a dashboard of the same car class, making sure that its weather icon is the same as the state of the race. On your next turn, you'll rejoin the track in the space that you left and set off from Gear 0. If you want to repair damage, swap your Gear 1 marker for Gear 00 and put all of the damage tokens on your dashboard back into the damage bag. On your next turn, you'll replace Gear 00 for Gear 0, and on the turn after that, you can return to the track with a car as fresh and as undented as you started. If you want to both change your tyres and repair damage, then you can make your repairs as we've just discussed, and then decide which dashboard you want to use at any point before rejoining the track. If another car has decided to end a turn in the space you want to rejoin, sadly you're going to have to wait on the side of the circuit until the space is free, so it might be wise to pull over in a space that other players don't want to visit. In Dirt, you again have the option of pulling off to the side of the road in first gear, even in spaces with speed limits this time, but only if you have an unused spare tyre card. If you do have one, instead of ending the turn in first gear and taking a Gear 1 time card as you normally would, you flip your spare tyre card over and put it on your stack of time cards to represent you pulling off the stage to replace a tyre. You can now remove one coast die damage token from your dashboard, and that's all. You can't swap your entire dashboard, that's too big a job to perform at the side of the road, and you can't repair any other kind of damage. You've literally only spent a few seconds swapping a tyre. If you can limp a broken car to the end of a stage, you are able to use your spare tyre card after you've crossed the finish line, and the benefit of doing so is that it won't cost you any time. We'll see why that's important later. If you want to repair all the other damage or swap out your dashboard, you'll have to make use of an assistance tile, and they can only be found at the end of a stage, though they might not always be present. If they are present, you can use it to remove all of your damage tokens, putting them back in the damage bag, and swap your dashboard for one of the same car class if you want. If you've used your spare tyre card, you even get it back to use again. But if there isn't an assistance tile to make any repairs, and there's still a stage to race through, you'll be carrying all of that damage over into the next stage, where you'll hope not to pick up any more. If all of that sounds like we're discussing some sort of strategy, you're right. We're now entering the kind of territory where thinking about how best to apply all these rules matters, and we're going to start by addressing the all-important notion of turn order. Everything we've learned up to now is useless if we don't know what to do with it, or why we ought to do one thing over another. There are two distinct turn orders in Rallyman. In circuit races like those of GT, turn order is defined by speed, distance, position. That is, whoever is in the highest gear, moving the fastest, goes first, no matter where they are on track. If there are multiple cars going at the same speed, the car that has moved the furthest distance, or is closer to the finish line, moves first. If there is still a tie, the car on the inside of the current or next corner goes first. So all cars in Gear 6 will take a turn before cars in Gear 5, who will act before cars in Gear 4, and so on, all the way down to Gear 0, and finally anyone in Gear 00. It is therefore vital to know your tiebreakers, especially what is and isn't a corner. A corner always has a speed limit, but perhaps confusingly, not every space with a speed limit is a corner. If it looks like a corner and has a bunch of speed limits, it's probably a corner. That's a very loosey-goosey definition, but it works, because this, no matter how curved it may appear, is not a corner. There are no speed limits here, and this piece of track is, functionally, according to the rules, straight. It is very common to see new players put themselves into one of these spaces thinking they have track position, when actually we're checking further up the road for an actual corner, and track position may therefore be on the other side of the road. In races where you care more about your finishing time and not your position, like in dirt, turn order is slightly different, with a distance, speed, position priority. That is, whoever is closest to the finish line moves first, and if there is a tie, whoever is fastest goes first, and if there is still a tie, whoever has track position goes first, again defined by who is on the inside of the current or next corner. If there are no corners left to check, whoever got to their space first goes first, essentially maintaining turn order from the previous round. Each turn you take, you will therefore have to ask yourself whether you want to sacrifice turn order in some fashion. If you drop your speed in a circuit race and end your turn in a low gear, you're going to act later in the round, assuming other players end their turns in higher gears, of course. Those other cars are therefore going to take their turn before you do, and potentially end up in a space that results in you being blocked, where you won't get to move at all. So you should always end your turns as fast as possible, right? Generally speaking, sure, that helps. But ending in a high gear might make it difficult or riskier to begin your next turn and get the most out of it. Think of a car that has to slam on the brakes to obey the speed limit on the first space of their next turn. They might have to roll 4 dice in this first space alone, easily enough to cause a loss of control. Maybe they avoid it and roll just 2 hazards, their limit being 3. Well, now they're walking on eggshells, with any dice that they choose to roll now being capable of causing a crash. Do they have enough focus tokens to pay to secure these dice? Will they have to end their turn sooner than they'd like, just to make sure that they don't crash? Perhaps it's better to end your turn not so fast and give yourself a safer turn next time. As I've said before, these kind of questions are often only answered with experience. Every situation that you find yourself in will be similar, but not necessarily identical to another that you've faced. You'll learn what not to do, usually by falling foul of something yourself, and the best players will rarely, if ever, see a crash as a game ender. So keep turn order in mind no matter what you do, but know that it's not necessary to always be first. You just need to be first when it matters. So when does it matter? Well, that depends on what kind of event you're in. So let's start wrapping up this video with an overview of each type of event that Rallyman is capable of. And remember, these can get fleshed out with advanced rules of their own, which we're not covering here. First up, circuit races. Mostly found in GT, but also in the likes of ice racing from the Dirt expansions, you race around one or more laps of a circuit. Each player will need a dashboard with a damage table and a set of gear markers of the matching colour. You might even have different designs of gear markers to allow for cars of the same colour to race against each other, or even partner up to form a team. Players should all have the same class of car, but if you want to mix car classes together, such as racing a GT6 against a GT4, you should use the BOP dashboards where they are available. BOP meaning balance of performance. These BOP dashboards aim to make the competition a little fairer between faster and slower cars. The table itself will need a track, obviously, and a round marker set to either colour. Put everyone's car on the grid in gear 0 with the same colour as the round marker. Everyone will take a turn in each round of the game, in turn order, where the priority is speed, distance, position. After you move, place a gear marker showing the opposite colour as the round marker, such that when no gear markers match the round marker, you'll know that everyone has taken a turn. Flip the round marker over and check turn order to see who moves first in the next round. Make sure there is a pile of focus tokens and a damage bag nearby. Make sure everyone's dashboard is showing the same weather icon, and get racing. Pursuit races are similar, where 2 circuit races take part on the same circuit. To do that, you'll need multiple start and finish lines. Split the cars into evenly matched groups and place each group behind a different start line. Treat each group separately, such that each car in one group will move before each car in the other group. A group only cares about its own finish line, and so ignores that of the other group. If a car crosses its own finish line, it wins the pursuit race, unless a car from the other group also crosses their finish line in the same round, in which case the car of those two with the most unspent focus tokens will be declared the winner. Rallycross events are also similar to circuit races, but with a few additional rules. Firstly, the track ought to have a starting grid that will join the track via a junction tile and will never be driven over again. Secondly, you're going to need a finish line, either printed on a tile or represented with the finish gate. It's best to put this on a tile edge to make it easier to see which space marks the end of a race. Finally, and critically, the track needs to have 2 different laps, using junction tiles to split off into new directions. One of these sections will be marked off with the Joker entry and exit gates and will be called the Joker lap. Before you reach the finish line and end the race, you will have to have driven through both of these gates once, thus completing the Joker lap, and have driven the entire standard lap as well. To keep track of this, all players will have a Joker token of their colour. If you don't flip this token over before you cross the finish line, you will be disqualified. You can tackle the laps in any order, which makes for a great strategic decision regarding when to take the Joker lap and when not to, especially if your race takes place over 3 or more laps. Just be sure not to forget to take it. Rallying is the first different event type found in Rallyman Dirt. A rally usually consists of an odd number of point-to-point stages where cars are timed from start to finish, and the driver with the lowest overall time after every stage has been finished is the winner. Each player will need a dashboard that features multiple surfaces, even if just the one surface will be driven over, and a spare tyre card that matches their colour. Unlike circuit racing, you don't need to have the same car class as your opponents. You might be in a slower car, but if their faster car can't ever get up to their high speed with tight and twisty stages, you might still come away with a win. The table will need a stage, and that stage may or may not end with an assistance tile. Only one player will take a turn in the first round. 2 players will take a turn in the second round, 3 players will take a turn in the third round, and so on until all players have started. This results in the staggered starts of the format, which is reinforced with the distance, speed, position, turn order priority, allowing players to concentrate on driving fast rather than side by side with their opponents. You'll also need the stack of time cards and a pile of second tokens. Additionally, when on gravel, the first player according to turn order each round will have to use the leader dice instead of the coast dice. We have finally gotten to the point in the video where we learn why they're called leader dice. If you're the first car to drive over this part of the stage, you will effectively be sweeping all of the loose rocks out of the way, making things easier for the cars behind you. This is represented by your coast dice, now leader dice, being a little riskier to roll. Importantly, the player considered to be the leader is only ever the first player according to turn order at the start of that round, meaning you can overtake the leader and still use coast dice on gravel, but once you end your turn and a new round begins, so long as nobody has overtaken you in the meantime, you're now the first player and are using leader dice on gravel. On snow or asphalt, the leader has nothing to worry about, and they use the colour of coast dice that their dashboard indicates. At the end of each turn, you'll be taking a time card to keep track of your stage time, with the higher gears representing faster turn times and the lower gears representing slower turn times. When you cross the finish line, add up all of the time cards that you've taken and subtract the amount of unspent second tokens that you've earned having gone flat out, if you did so. That's the other sensible use of second tokens that we mentioned way back when. The result is your stage time. Record it and return the time cards and second tokens to their relevant piles. Whoever has the fastest overall rally time after everyone has completed a stage will be the first car into the next stage, and so the slowest driver overall will be the last car to begin the next stage. Keep racing down new stages until the rally is complete. Hill climbs are similar to rallies, except that you'll race over the same stage 3 times, the driver with the fastest stage time being the winner. While you can use any dashboard you want, it's advisable to use an unlimited dashboard that you can construct yourself, filling in its slots to include whatever and however many dice you want, but the more slots you fill up, the lower your loss of control limit. The top row is filled with either surface icons or weather icons, depending on what you need for the event ahead, and the further to the right that they are placed, the more slots that surface is allowed to use, as marked by the red lines as you can see here. The slots can be filled up with a variety of things, mostly types and values of dice. You can even put more than one instance of a particular gear die, allowing you to use it more than once on your turns. There are also tokens that allow you to ignore damage taken from shortcuts, known as puncture-proof tyres, and Sisu tokens that allow you to ignore the rules of velocity control, treating all of your dice as having been secured instead, even after you've rolled them. Finally, there are a number of tokens that you can use just to fill up the slots in one way or another, such as telling players that they can't use a certain gear value on their dashboard. When everyone has a dashboard, make sure everyone has 3 try tokens in their colour and have the first player take to the start line of the climb, which doesn't have to include an ascent or descent tile, but is definitely more thematic if it does. Like in a rally, only one player will have a turn in the first round, with the turn order priority being distance, speed, position. When a player crosses the finish line, they turn over their first try token, record their time as they would in a rally, and then get the opportunity to change the tokens on their dashboard in whatever fashion they like. Whatever they decide, the next round of the event does not begin until this player is ready to set off from the start line for their next attempt at a fast stage time. Only one car can start a climb attempt per round, and if it's a short climb, no second attempts can be started before everyone has started their first attempt. This all means that the stage continues to evolve until everyone has finished their third attempt. So shortcuts might make corners muddier and muddier, for example, and the lines players take will have to change accordingly. Naturally, any of these event types can be made into a championship, with points awarded for each finishing position as more and more events are run before a champion is crowned. But the most interesting multi-event format that Rallyman offers is the Auto Tour. In such a tour, players pick one car class, taking it into many different kinds of event, and while they can change dashboards according to the rules of the individual event, they cannot ever change their car class. So while they might be strong around a circuit, they probably won't be when going off-road in a rally. It's a great way to learn how a car behaves in different situations. The tour as a whole is timed, so the driver with the fastest overall time will be crowned the winner, but circuit races award multiples of 10 seconds for your finishing position. Winning a circuit race adds 10 seconds to your overall time, coming in second adds 20 seconds, third adds 30 seconds, and so on, though the consensus amongst the community is that you might want to adjust this multiplier to 30 seconds instead of 10. Doing so will put greater importance on winning a circuit race and will allow players who aren't so good on the rally stages to try and make up more time where their cars are more suited. If you've made it this far through the video, you are definitely ready to play Rallyman, but there is one thing that I still haven't told you, and that's how to actually cross the finish line. It's really simple. You put a die in the space after the finish line, and that's it. Any space beyond this doesn't exist, so you can't keep placing dice out for one massive final flat out roll. You'll have to have done all of that before the finish line. Whatever speed you intend to be in this space is your final ending speed, because of course you can still crash in this space, and that may have consequences. The order of events is that your car crossed the line, the time or the victory was recorded, and then you crashed, potentially taking damage. This isn't important in circuit races. As soon as you cross the line, you finish. But in rallying, this might be really important, as there may still be stages left to race through, and there might not be an assistance tile for you to repair damage. And with that, you've learned the basics of Rallyman. Whether you want that to mean getting the full driving license or just a provisional one is up to you, because believe it or not, there is still so much to learn, especially because we've not touched on any of the meatier advanced rules that make some of these events really shine. And it's not just you that can learn. Even I, all of these years later, am learning new things about this game, and sometimes those new things have led to questions that have as yet gone unanswered. It's impossible to cover all possible situations that you might find yourself in out on track, and so Rallyman includes a global fallback rule that is, essentially, if you don't know how to apply the rules, make them up on the spot and keep racing. Seriously, if you get into an argument over what you should or should not do, take a vote, apply the ruling that you've decided on, and check it all over after the race. A lot of players favour the rule of cool when faced with any problems. Whatever the coolest thing to happen would be, that's what happens. Other players favour authenticity to the real world. Whatever would actually happen, happens. Whatever you decide, keep it consistent during this event and get back into having fun. The rules lawyering can wait. It is entirely possible that I've overlooked something, and while I don't want to say it, it is also possible that I've got something wrong. But these are the basic rules as written in the rulebox that you'll see in modern Rallyman titles, but they aren't necessarily the rules that everyone plays by, be it because of the use of advanced rules or even house rules. Always be sure to know what is and isn't a rule before you go into an event, because as I've said and will continue to say, Rallyman is flexible, allowing for all manner of possibilities. It's a toolbox for motorsport on your tabletops, and now you know how to use a spanner, it won't be long before you'll want to progress onto the use of a wheel gun.